My name is Julie Howard. I'll be your moderator for today's session, and people are still joining us, but we've got a really packed and wonderful agenda today, so I want to get started. So I'm one of the co-chairs of the ARD working group, and I'm just one co-chair. The other co-chairs, all of whom contribute to the organization of today's session, are Maria Boa, Mark Heisinger, Frank Place, and Leonard Walshring. I want to say just a brief word about the Global Community of Practice on Scaling Development Outcomes, or Scaling COP, as we say. The COP was founded 8 years ago, my goodness, by Larry Cooley and Johannes Lind. And the idea was to create a platform for knowledge exchange among experts, practitioners, and stakeholders on approaches to scaling up development interventions. I also wanted to see how we might work together to champion the idea about how important scaling is if we are to achieve global aims like the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change targets. The COP is all volunteer. We now have some 2,500 members from around the world and from diverse organizations. The COP is organized into 9 working groups. In addition to ag and rural development, there are groups such as education, health, nutrition, climate change, fragile states, and monitoring and evaluation. Each working group hosts a program of interactive seminars through the year. The COP puts out a regular newsletter and has commissioned a number of thought pieces on scaling. All of these resources available on the Scaling COP website. If you're not already a member of the COP at ARD or another working group, we warmly welcome you to join us. A couple of housekeeping details before I introduce today's session and the speakers. We in ARD love an engaged audience, so please do use the chat function to post questions and comments. We'll have a few minutes at the end for Q&A, but the panelists and other co-chairs are going to be monitoring the chat and adding in reflections on questions and comments as we go along. I'd like to ask all the participants to please turn off the videos and mute your mics unless you are speaking. So now let me turn to our session. The theme is coordinating national scaling efforts for food systems transformation. And why do we choose this theme? Well, first, I think everybody's aware there's been a welcome surge of interest in scaling related to food systems over the last several years, perhaps because the deadline for achieving the SDGs is getting so very close. There seem to be an increasing number of parallel scaling efforts by different organizations, projects, and initiatives related to food systems at the country level. At the same time, the conceptual and operational frameworks for rural and agricultural development have been undergoing pretty radical change. The main shift has been from an almost exclusive focus on agricultural productivity to a broader food systems approach. While improving ag productivity continues to be a core objective, now the food systems approach explicitly recognizes the critical relationship of the food system to human health, environmental sustainability, resilience, and equity. And so this new imperative to address and balance multiple objectives and cross-sectoral impacts, not only productivity, makes the scaling process much more complex. So the core question we've asked our panelists to address is how parallel scaling efforts by different organizations, projects, and initiatives could be made less independent and fragmented at the country level, while facilitating greater engagement and leadership by country partners in both the public and private sectors. We're really fortunate today to have with us 6 speakers, all of whom have deep experience with food systems development and scaling at national and regional levels in Africa. Our speakers bring experience from different countries, and they also come from different sectors and vantage points on development and scaling, from government, from civil society, the private sector, and international organizations and funders. So let me briefly introduce all of today's speakers. You'll see their bios flashing on the screen, and you can look at them more carefully on the Scaling COP website afterwards. Mr. Eric Gitera is the Chief Technical Advisor of the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources in Rwanda. Then we'll have Dr. Stella Mukokwa, who is the Principal Research Scientist with the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. Next up, Ms. Tendai Saidi, she is the head of programs and policy for the Civil Society Agriculture Network, CSANET, in Malawi. Next, Dr. Amos Rutherford. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Legacy Crop Improvement Center, a private company specializing in production and marketing of foundation seeds in Ghana. Our final panelist is Dr. Mark Schutt. He is an innovation and scaling advisor and senior scientist with CGIAR and Wageningen University. And then our final speaker is Dr. Stefan Hacheris Mates, who will offer discussants comments. He's the project manager for the GIZ Fund for Supporting International Agricultural Research. So now I'd like to turn the floor over to Eric Gatera. Rwanda is well known for its success in developing agriculture sector programs targeted at smallholders and achieving results at scale. We've asked Eric to reflect on some of the lessons from the ministry's experience in coordinating development programs and think together with and share some lessons about how Rwanda's experience may be useful for other countries and for Rwanda going forward into the food systems environment. So Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. I had a PowerPoint. Maybe I'll be waiting for it before I begin. But I would like first to say that I'm pleased to have been invited, for the ministry to have been invited to this platform to exchange with all our colleagues here present, our experiences, so that we can strengthen our experiences in the food system respectively. Yeah. And what I will do today, as I wait for the PowerPoint to be on display, will to present a little bit how we did our food system, and through that explain in the process how our coordination mechanism usually works. So next slide as we begin. So I will be tackling only 3 aspects of this presentation, given the limited time that we all have. I'll give a quick overview of the food system in Rwanda, at least how we did engage our stakeholders to build the food system dialogue that we had 2 years ago, then highlight some key lessons learned in general in the agriculture sector in Rwanda, and then also speak about the coordination mechanism that we use. This coordination mechanism, which is applied to the food system, was previously applied only for the agriculture sector, but I'll speak more about that afterwards. Next slide. Next one. Thank you. So we had 3 buckets, if I have to put it in this way. So the national dialogue on when we started, we understood that we had limited time when we were informed of that. The easiest way for us to coordinate the sector and bring everybody on board for this series of meetings was not to create a new type of platform, but to use existing platform. As we all know, when we introduce new platform or new innovation, there's always a lapse of time for people to really get used to the system. So we decided to use something that was already known to our stakeholders, which I'll discuss on the 3rd point. So on our coordinating platform, we do have development partners, which is DP. We have NGOs with us. We have professional bodies. We have institute. We have university. We also have sister ministries that are not only the agriculture sector, but we have the Ministry of Environment. We have the MINALOG, which is the Ministry of Local Government, and many other institutions that works with us to strengthen the food system. As we understand, the food system is not only about the agriculture sector, but is actually cross-cutting, touching the agriculture sector, but the remaining of the value chain and all the different actors that have a hand into our food, basically. After that, what came out of it was the design of some of the game-changing solution, and how we did that was actually after consultation and a lot of debate, we came to a couple of agreements on on looking at the gaps that we still have in our food system and turn them into the anchor for our food, our game-changing solutions. And some of them did not yet have specific solutions. Some of them had solution, homegrown solution, and one of the decisions we took was to scale it up, and that became the platform on which we were able to invite people to bring investment. And that's the next step. So we are still on this phase. We are working with a consulting firm who's helping us to diagnose and think through along with us on how we can actually bring these game-changing solution priorities into actual and actionable items that can actually help the system. Next slide. These are, if I give it as a highlight, the 6 groupings for our game-changing solutions, starting from the bottom. So we have the nutritious food program. So we have a lot of intervention doing the nutritious program, and one of them was the food composition table, which is still ongoing. And the idea is when we say we need to have nutrition, but what do we really mean by nutrition, and what do we really have in country that we can actually use in order to boost the nutrition aspect of the country. The second one was on food loss and waste management, which is really touching the post-harvest handling mechanism. We even have commissioned a study that is very soon to be validated on the post-harvest management countrywide. That started post the event. The third one is inclusive markets and food value chain. We've noticed that, and that came out during the discussion with stakeholders, that we're very weak in our market and our value chain. So we decided to strengthen it. One of the way we did it was, instead of just having it as an item that is recurrent in discussion, we decided to bring a department that was non-existent first in the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources. And now we have a new full-fledged department with its Director General and staff that follows the market, called the Agricultural Value Chain and Trade. The fourth one is the Sustainable and Resilient Food Production System. We're already doing that. We have a sister institution that help us with it. We just decided to strengthen it. The fifth one is including financing and innovation and investment. We also have effective mainstreaming of youth, women, and food system. Next one. This gives you again an idea. So what lead us? We have on the national level, we have the Vision 2050, which has replaced the Vision 2020. The NST1 is actually our national strategy for transformation of the country, and this give us the rhythm on which we're working. We have now the flagship that I've shared with you. And we also have a strategic plan for the agricultural transformation, which is called the sector strategy plan. And this helps all the stakeholders to be aligned and helps actually organize our stakeholders and the coordination of the whole system. I've already spoken about the idea of the flagship. So next slide. So these are the programs that we work on for the flagship. We have scaling up of the African Improved Foods, which is a company. It's a PPP between the government of Rwanda and the private sector. We have the school feeding program. This is an interface between the Ministry of Agriculture and the MINALOC, which is the Ministry of Local Government, and also the Ministry of Education. We have the Black Soldier Love of Life initiative. This is the Ministry of Agriculture with the private sector. It's a PPP, but also with RDB, which is the Rwanda Development Board. We have the crop intensification program. We have the livestock. We have the GACO integrated beef, the Gabiro, and the commercialization. This gives you this big program that shows you that it's not only driven by the ministry, although we lead it, but we have to work in consultation with other ministry in order to reach success. Next slide. Best practice, next slide. It's only one slide. among the best practices that I might be willing to share was to have a very strong strategy. And the way the strategy was developed, we did our national strategy in consultation with all the stakeholders. We had multiple events, and it took us a full year so that we can have buy-in. And our logic was we will not use a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach, whereas we crowd discussion from farmers to private sector to development partners. We came to design a strategy where everybody were comfortable and could understand, because they all had a hands in the development of that. So that happened with the PSTF4. We have also a platform for coordination. The most known one is the Agriculture Sector Working Group. It's a monthly event where we meet and we have regular items that are discussed in the joint sector review. So let me put it this way. Each year, we have, when we begin the new fiscal year, we have a coordination meeting where we bring all the stakeholders, where we present the performance of the sector. And through that, we discuss about priorities. And at the end of the fiscal year, we again have another big meeting, still called joint sector, but this is forward-looking, where priority for the next fiscal year is discussed and some items to be worked up. And on a monthly basis, we have the Agriculture Sector Working Group that help us track down commitment that we took during the joint sector review. And on the smaller level, now this is not, it's still cross-cutting, but it's really limited for expert. It's the cluster and the value chain platform, where only selected people, still coming from different sectors, help discuss on the technical level on issues that are being discussed on a higher level during the Agriculture Sector Working Group. And then we also have the motto of decentralization, which means there's a lot of activity that the ministry used to do, but now we have decentralized it into the district level. Even the funding that comes to the ministry goes to the district level for implementation. So that's one of the way we ensure that there is implementation, but there's also accountability for those who are practicing down there. We also have reinforced the digitalization of the sector as a way to coordinate the sector. That's why we have not only physical in-person meetings, but we also have online meeting, regular meeting of the sector with ministers, with governors and mayor. This help actually maintain that cohesion. And therefore, the digitalization has been really strengthened in all the ministry. We even have created a full department called the digitalization department. This was, I was just highlighting some of the homegrown solutions, but that are usually cross-cutting. Next. So this picture that you see will give you an idea of how our coordination works. We have what we call, everybody have it, KPI, those key performance indicator. So each ministry has that, but when we begin each fiscal year, districts and ministries and sister ministry gathers to discuss about the targets of the year that have to happen nationwide. And then we agree on key performance indicators. We agree on the metrics. And at the end of the fiscal year, we come back and then we look at how our performance have been done. And after we have done our own assessment, the government on a high level usually bring a private organization that come to do a type of audit of our performance, and in order to help us be objective in how well we have done. And then, of course, based on that, there's either reward or other way to encourage those who have delayed or lagged behind in the performance to increase the performance. So the agriculture sector is the main platform that we use. Even the joint sector review use the same type of people, but it's probably really high level where the minister come. But in the agriculture sector working group, the one chairing it is the PS, which is who's the permanent secretary of the minister, and the co-chair is always one member of the development partners, and they usually do a rotation depending on years. Currently, it's the World Bank, which is the co-chair. Before, it was the EU, and on and on. So we have discussion and delegation for that, and we also have votes to find out who's going to be the one co-leading. And this really helps us with transparency once we know that we have co-chair, we have indicators, we have independent organization that comes and help us see how well we have achieved and what remains to be done. And the cluster are spread across based on the department that exists in the ministry, the technical department I meant. We have a planning department, so they usually leads this cluster called the planning cluster. We have the crop development cluster led by the Director General of the said department in the ministry. We have the agribusiness cluster that is led by the new department that has been created on value chain and trade. And then we also have the animal resources. So this is a bit how we work in Rwanda and how we make sure that we follow up on indicators and we continue to work. And this has helped us with CADAP in our performance. We are not yet where we want to be, but we're really striving for that. So that's basically it. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much for this rich presentation. It's very difficult for me to control my impulse to ask you the 5 questions I've already noted down, but hopefully we'll have some time afterwards. Anyway, many thanks. That was perfect introduction, bird's eye view of what it looks like from the government's coordination standpoint. So thank you so much. All right. Good. Well, so next we have another speaker from the government, but this time from Kenya, Stella Mukokwa. So I'd like to turn to Dr. Mukokwa. She is with the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization. And we invited Stella because last year Stella led efforts from Kenya's Ministry of Agriculture to improve coordination and collaboration across initiatives focusing on a particular area, on scaling climate change prediction, adaptation, and mitigation innovations. Really interesting. So we asked Stella to tell us about that effort and how it went, and what she sees as the main opportunities and challenge to improve coordination and scaling efforts going forward in Kenya and also other countries. So Stella, are you with us? If so, please turn on your screen and your mic.
Yes, is it okay now?
Yes, we can see you. You're a little dark, but I think we can see you.
Okay.
That's a little better. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's evening here in Kenya. I'm glad to be invited to this very interesting forum. I'm here to share my experiences in the Ministry of Agriculture, and partly the experiences I've had in the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, because that is where I've worked for a long time. I would like to start by saying that coordination and collaboration in the ministry, I think, has never been more relevant than it is at this point. Why do I say this? I say this because Kenya has had its devolution of the central government to have county governments. Now we have one national government and we have county governments. And with those county governments, they have their own policies and strategies in agriculture, because agriculture was devolved. So it is the responsibility of the ministry, that is the central government, to coordinate all these governments in the counties. So coordination and collaboration actually becomes more relevant because of that, because the different counties have their own agricultural policies and strategies, and the national government needs to talk to these county governments and see now how to work together. Another reason why it's coordination and collaboration has been is more relevant now is because of the climate change aspect. You know, the climate change aspect has come up with the, needing new strategies for us to now address the food system, and also it needs new technologies. So it's it's important that different parties have to come together to discuss this because of these emerging issues. And also in Kenya, particularly, we've had a big challenge of distribution of food. You realize that you could be having a glut in a particular part of the country, but a big deficit, food deficit in another. And the problem here is normally distribution. We are talking about roads. We are talking about roads. We are talking about lack of information as to where people can access food. So you realize that different ministries have to talk to one another to address these distribution challenges. For example, the Ministry of Transport has to come in, work with the Ministry of Agriculture to address these distribution challenges. So as we talk about coordination and collaboration, I think it makes much more sense in Kenya because of those challenges, and also with the ever-increasing scarce resources. When we have scarce resources, we need to come together and see how to, as different ministries, to see how to use the scarce resources and avoid duplication of efforts. Because we have very many agencies or very many organizations addressing food systems issues. So if we don't come together, you realize that maybe there's one organization doing the exact same thing that another organization is doing. So this collaboration and coordination is quite relevant in Kenya. So having said that, I think the way I see it, the way the Ministry of Agriculture has addressed this collaboration issue, I must say I've not been in the Ministry of Agriculture for long, but for the short time I've been there, I've realized that the efforts to collaborate across centers, across ministries, has brought in development of very good documents that the ministry is working with. One of them is what we call the agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy. This is a document that was developed by different organizations. This was the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, which is a parastatal, and other ministries. There was the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water. They came together and formed this agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy. And this strategy is now a document that is guiding many projects in the Ministry of Agriculture. And when we look at the Ministry of Agriculture, actually, I can count up to 8 major projects that are being implemented. And these are the projects that have been implemented between 2013, or rather 2012 to 2022. And these projects have been all over in the 47 counties of Kenya. One of the projects is called the Small Scale Irrigation and Value Addition Project, shortened as CVAP, which was started in 2016, and it's supposed to have ended in 2022. This project was funded by the African Development Bank and the government of Kenya. And then we also have another big project called Drought Resilience and Sustainable Livelihoods Program. This one is also sponsored by the African Development Bank and the government of Kenya. So you realize that these projects are addressing issues affecting mostly the small-scale farmers, so that they can increase their productivity, and at the end of the day, address the challenges in their food system. We also have another project called the Kenya Cereal Enhancements Program, shortened as KCEP, funded by the government of Kenya, EU, and IFAD. This one was concentrating on the cereals, the sorghum, maize, sorghum, and rice. So it's a program that is, I think, winding up, but it's been on since since 2013. Then there was another one. There's another one called Regional Pastoral Livelihoods Resilient Project. Then the ones I'm very familiar with because I've participated. I've participated in the projects are the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, KSAP, shortened as KSAP. And then there's another one called NARIG, that is National Agricultural and Rural Inclusive Growth Project. So the KSAP, let me start with the KSAP, was started to just mainly address climate smart, come up with climate smart solutions to the challenges of climate change. And this project has been implemented in the universities, has been implemented in research institutions like CARRO and Kenya Forest Research Institute, and then Kenya Marine Research Institute. So you realize it has gone across many research institutions and many universities. And it's winding up this year. I think by mid this year it should have wound up. But what I've realized that it has come up with quite a number of innovations that are a solution to the challenges experienced in climate with the climate change. Innovations from universities, even from students, innovations from researchers, and these innovations are quite practical because when we look at these innovations, if they are implemented, if they are supported, they are going to address very many challenges of climate change. This project has been sponsored by the World Bank, the government of Kenya, and various research institutions and universities have participated. Then there is another one I mentioned called National Agricultural and Rural Inclusive Growth Project, NARIG. This one went in and started supporting communities. So they looked at the communities, what their priorities were, and what the challenges they had, and they started supporting them. And then also just empowering the communities in places where they lack skills to forge their agenda. And this project has been in 21 counties and supported by the World Bank and the government of Kenya. We also have had research institutions and universities also in this project. And then there's another one called Enable Youth Kenya project. This one has been supporting the youth, empowering the youth so that they can start small agribusiness projects. You realize in the developing countries, and Kenya in particular is having challenges of very high unemployment rate, especially among the youth. So this project came to offer a solution so that the youth can become self-employed. So those are some of the projects I can mention. And a project like KSAP and NARIG, we've seen very many positive outputs from the projects. Communities have been empowered, and they have actually testified to the fact that these two projects have actually assisted them. We found that communities that had challenges with the access to water, challenges with the access to markets, were actually empowered, and now they are much better than they were before. And there have been linkage to markets also, and there are some places where farmers produce, but linkage to markets is a challenge. So communities have had have been linked to markets where they have sold their produce. So actually, we can mention quite a number of benefits that these interventions from the KSAP and NARIG programs have brought.
Thank you, Stella. I'm sorry to cut you off. We're going to need to move on. This has been fascinating. Clearly, we need to have you back to speak for an entire session. This is so much, and there's already, as you may see in the chat, there are already a number of questions that people have for you. So I think we move the conversation from the screen to the chat box for now, so we can move on to our next presenter. But really appreciate your insights here. Very, very important. Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And now, do we have Tendai Saidi? Are you with us? Let me just introduce her. She is from the Civil Society Agriculture Network of Malawi, and we've been talking a bit about nutrition this morning. She is a registered public health nutritionist, as well as her role of head of programs and policy at CSANET. And so just as a way of introduction, over the past several years, in addition to all the attention to scaling and the food systems transformation that's going on, there's been also increased focus on bringing in local and national stakeholders like farmers organizations, women's youth group to the table as priorities for food systems investment are debated and decided. And beyond this, there have been increasing calls for these groups to have a greater role in program implementation and in resource management. So we asked Tendai to come tell us about CSANET and the role that CSANET is playing in Malawi, and the role she sees for local organization in coordinating, scaling, and improving the effectiveness of development programs. Tendai, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Julie. I hope I'm audible enough. Okay, so I'm just going to give a brief background of what CSANET is. As I've been listening to the presentations that have been done now, which are excellent indeed, I wanted to really highlight how we as CSANET function. So CSANET is actually a member network of organization working within the agriculture space. CSANET meaning the Civil Society Agriculture Network. And our vision is to be a leading network that effectively coordinates and fosters collaboration among non-state actors towards Malawi's agriculture transformation. And with this vision, we also have our key ambition to be pro-poor. So in whatever we are doing, we make sure that we are doing it for the smallholder farmers who are the majority of the people within Malawi. We are also making sure that we are influencing policy. So you'll find that our major role as CSANET, when I go into the presentations, is around influencing agriculture policies and also advocacy, research, and networking with our members. So currently we have a strategic plan which was running from 2018 and comes to an end this year, 2023. And in this strategic plan, we had 5 priority areas. The first one being mutual accountability and transparency in the agriculture sector. And under this strategic priority, we mainly focus on the agriculture budget and also what we call joint sector reviews, looking at what other partners are also contributing towards the agriculture sector and how that translates into implementation. So the whole issue with mutual accountability and transparency is also on holding duty bearers accountable to what they have committed to doing, especially to the people at grassroots level. Our second strategic priority is on capacity building and organizational development. And since I've mentioned already that our main focus is on advocacy, on policy advocacy, our capacity building is mainly to do with district strategic planning, district advocacy, policy analysis, budget analysis, and all these issues that to some extent build on the evidence needed in making a strong advocacy platform. Then the third one is policy research and analysis. We do acknowledge that in any advocacy that we do, in any advocacy space we are infiltrating, we need to have real data, real evidence. And so our advocacy efforts are informed by are informed by evidence. And because of this, we also invest a lot into budget analysis as our main or our primary source or data to influence how budget committees are allocating resources towards agriculture. We have also in the past year signed active MOUs with MAPATA, a youth think tank within Malawi, and also IFPRI, who also assist us with some of the information that they do research on and we disseminate this. Our fourth strategic priority is on monitoring, evaluation, learning, and sharing, where we continuously monitor to see what's on the ground. So let's say the government is implementing the Affordable Inputs Program. Civil society is on the ground, are there to see if it's being implemented correctly and it's fitting the required beneficiaries. And if there's anything going on, we try to trickle that all the way to policymakers. We also, from what our members are implementing, we also learn from them and share with the wider network as well. Then our fifth strategic priority is on communication, networking, and member engagement, where at all times we try to make information available to our members. So if it's the development of a position paper, of a policy brief, or maybe it's an opinion paper, we always try to engage them as well so that they also input into these documents that we are developing. So ours is strongly, it's strongly just advocacy that we do. In 2022, our policy focuses were on the Affordable Inputs Program, mainly advocating for reforms. What you'll notice that is, as much as Malawi does meet the 10% CADIP recommendation for allocating the public budget towards agriculture, 85% of the program's budget within agriculture actually goes to the AIP. That leaves only a small fraction which goes to other equally important interventions such as agriculture extension services, irrigation, research, and also livestock, and to the livestock sector. So given this, we have been lobbying for a very long time that the AIP is reworked and reforms are put into place so that we also see the budget also being allocated to things that also make more sense or are equally important. We've also been advocating on the Food and Nutrition Bill, which is a framework law seeking to effectively guarantee the right to adequate food and nutrition for all. As I have mentioned, we are pro-poor, and at the heart of everything we do, we try to also ensure that we are talking for the citizens and for the smallholder farmers. And the right to food bill actually, the Food and Nutrition Bill actually talks to this. So it's also an issue of inclusion where we are also trying to have those community voices heard as well. Then another focus area has been the Seed Act, which was a bill, and then with advocacy around it, we influenced its passing in the Parliament. But again, it's also looking at the whole food system and how when we are regulating the production, the processing, sale, importation, or exportation of seed, we ensure that citizens at grassroots have good quality seed that they are making use of and not counterfeit seed that will only cost more without actually reaping much. Then there is the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we see a free trade area of 55 countries. And again, food systems are also about trade and making trade accessible to all, and without, with those reductions in tariff barriers, which the ACFTA actually speaks to. And then we were actually one of the networks that was also supporting the government with the UNFSS process. So also acknowledging that for our food systems at the moment are under threat, and we need to rethink how we've been dealing with our food systems, how we've been producing food, and how we ensure that food finally gets to the beneficiaries. And is it healthy enough to feed a nation? So also looking at the 5 action tracks on good nutrition for all, on sustainable consumption, on boosting nature positive production, equitable livelihoods, and resilience to shocks. All of these are at the core of what we have been promoting also this past year. And now that there's a national pathways document, which was developed from the nationwide consultations that were part of the UNFSS, our goal now is to ensure that our duty bearers, which are the policymakers, the implementers, actually work towards seeing these action tracks come to become actioned. So challenges sometimes that we face in increasing the voices and agencies of stakeholders. One of them is the poor intra and intersectoral collaboration and coordination. I think we have seen quite a number of projects and programs within Malawi, well crafted, but you'll find that for people to work across sectors, sometimes it becomes difficult. The agriculture sector would rather work as the agriculture sector, the Ministry of Health as the Ministry of Health. But when you're looking at a food systems perspective, we are trying to see these collaborations come into play. And now, as a network, we actually build these collaborations through bringing different partners who are on the ground to collaborate in actions that we feel are close to us. So writing of position papers, for instance, fighting for an agenda, maybe with the parliamentary committee, we come together, put our position together as a network, and then we try to fight this as a way to solve these intra-sectorial collaboration. So CISONET at the moment also works together with CISONA, especially in the food systems space, where CISONA is the Civil Society Alliance on Nutrition, but now under the Ministry of Health. Also, another one is duty bearers not acting to their voice. So I'll take an example of the national pathways, for instance. And now there is mention of development of food systems investment plan. But that food systems investment plan should not be separate from what was already suggested within the national pathways. Because if it's separate now, it becomes void of inclusion. And now our role is to ensure that in those, the investment plan talks to the national pathways, because the national pathways were voices from everyone at grassroots. So we are now lobbying that if it's an investment plan, that it's aligned to the food systems pathways. And the food systems pathways were informed by women, by youth, and we made sure that they occupied the dialogues space during the UNFSS. And they still, when we are doing dialogues, even up till now at national level, we try to ensure that there are women groups to represent women, youth groups to represent youth as well, so that their voices are included in whatever policies are being implemented at national level. The other challenge that we face is that there's often conflicting priorities, especially in the face of natural disasters and pandemics. And because of this, we find that in a situation where the UNFSS momentum had built so much, it sort of dies down because maybe another disaster has come up. We now have cholera that we are dealing with, and that momentum sort of dies out when we were now trying to see how do we move this agenda forward, how do we go? But because the priorities have shifted, things sort of slowed down, and we see that that died down in spirit, especially amongst actors. But again, as civil society, we are trying to continuously push the agenda to remind duty bearers of their commitment that they put towards the national pathways. Because if you look at the national pathways, the short-term goals were set at 3 years. So if we're measuring 3 years from 2021 when the UNFSS were held, we only have until 2024 to implement the short-term goals.
Tendai, thank you. I'm so sorry. This is frustrating.
Okay.
I have to stop you now. Next time we need to invite you for much more time to speak about your efforts. I think it's fascinating, and you'll see already a lot of comments and questions directed for you in the chat. So if you could take a look at that and respond, your fans are waiting. So thank you, thank you so much. Okay, well, so now we're going to turn to Dr. Amos Rutherford. So it's interesting that Tendai mention that one of their initiatives in CSNET is ensuring quality seed getting to smallholders, and that's exactly the focus of our next speaker, who is the CEO and founder of the Legacy Crop Improvement Center in Ghana. So we asked Amos to come and talk to us because Ghana's seed sector has undergone some major changes over the last decade, and we've asked him to reflect on those changes, their impact on Ghana's ag sector, and more broadly, we asked him to talk about the private sector's role in coordinating scaling efforts and the main opportunities and challenges that the private sector plays in taking on this role. So Amos, over to you, please, for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for inviting me for this discussion. As I wait for the PowerPoint, yes, thank you. So, welcome everyone. Good evening from Ghana. My name is already on the screen. My name is Amos, and I will be talking to you on the role of private sector in terms of seed and scaling up technology to smallholder farmers in Ghana. Next slide, please. So we shall be looking at the Ghana seed sector in a short. That we look at what we do for my company at SCIC. That we look at some challenges and opportunities that are in the sector. Next slide, please. Go. Continue. We want to yeah. Okay, thank you, fantastic. So I just want to give you a short history in where Ghana stands. From today, we talk about the scaling up and commercialization of seed, especially hybrid maize, because the maize or the corn that a lot of people refer to is more like a market present in the market. A lot of seed market revolve around hybrid seed. So in building a solid and vibrant seed sector, one cannot do without establishment of that commodity. So in hybrid maize markets, a lot of people think that it's today that we are talking of hybrid maize. In 1950s, Ghana first commercialized its first hybrid in 1958, but that was in the public sector. So there were no private involvement. Moving on to 1960s, that system collapsed where government take in charge of the hybrid seed commercialization. So you see they have that, they have converted to OPV, which is open pollinated, and it has been like that in the hand of the states. No private sector involvement. In 90s, the private investment from CGIAR Global 2000 have to come in order for the state to be able to provide a good quality seed for smallholder farmers or farmers in general in this country, indicating to you that when the state want to take over a business that's supposed to be given to the private sector people, the state is always inefficient. In 1996, the state managed to release another hybrid again called Mamaba, and it will be shocked to you to realize that from 96 to 2007, nothing has been done to that. It has not been commercialized, have been released and registered. So from 1997 to 2006, there were no activity of hybrids or seed commercialization in this country. So for that matter, that hybrid, the second one that was released in 1996, have not even seen the light of the day. Moving forward from 2007 to 2017, there were new hybrids that were released. And most important thing that happened to the sector was the Plant and Fertilizer Act that was passed, actually to allow private sector participation in the seed business, especially in early generation seed production. And that actually prepared a new private seed company and also enable association, that's the NASDAQ, National Seed Trade Association, to be formed. And currently have about 58 members of the seed company in that channel. Next slide. So you realize from the history, the short history I give you, that yes, every state wants to build a vibrant seed sector, but the leakage that's missing between the research and the poor farmer or whatever farmers have found themselves in this country is the lack of private sector participation in that chain. So the research is doing experts. The farmers in one hand are looking for good technology that should be scaled up for their crop production. but the one that's supposed to bridge that gap is the private sector, and that private sector for so long time have been missing from that chain. Next slide, please. So in a private sector company like the one I work for, what is our vision? Our vision is actually to scale up technology, to commercialize those technology to farmers, to sustain food production. Basically, that's what a private sector is set up to do. Not the state, as we have seen that the state were not efficient in terms of delivering that service to a smallholder farmers. Next slide. So what is the indicator? If we want to have that system, it means that the seed have to be readily available. The farmers should have whatever they want, and it should be of a good quality. That's the one point. And not only availability and quality of it, it also should be accessible. The farmer doesn't need to walk so many miles to buy a kilo of seed or corn or soya beans or vegetable seed. It should be close to how does the private sector people take that business to the farmers. And aside that, even if it's accessible and it's of quality and it's available, affordability is also an issue. So that's where the scaling up of technology like corn seed and vegetable seed, all those things have become very important. Each purchasing power of the farmers are very, very important. And most importantly, we are not only from the private sector perspective, only marketing anything to the farmers. The product that have been commercialized to the farmers, you have the product that we call, you have a positive PCF value, what they mostly refer in marketing, a product competitive index. Many of these products in the past, if you look at the reason why a lot of parasiticides in the states could not survive is because those products that they commercialize to the farmers are products that has negative value. The product that can be easily replicated, can be copied. So many private companies will not want a product that a competitor can easily have access to and even manufacture, for lack of better words. So we realize that in the past, the state have moved away from open pollinated varieties into commercialization of hybrid seed, because that's where the private sector can be more comfortable to do the kind of investment that is needed for its establishment. But if the product has a negative value, that technology doesn't worth it to even get a loan from private sector or a bank to do that work by the private sector. Next slide. So this graph just to give you what happened in 2007 to 2021, 2017 to 2021. Now the new government, the government that is in power now came to power. They have an agenda that they call planting for food and job. What they want to do is to make sure they make seed, fertilizer, and other agro input available to farmers to produce in order to sustain food production. So the subsidy is that. So you see, for instance, if you take hybrid maize in 2017, we were like zero for that, meaning that a lot of people were not involved. But once the private sector was motivated, was supported, we realized that in 2018, you have 742 metric tons of hybrid that was generated. In the following year, you can see the graph, the value keep on increasing. That is the essence of a private sector participation in the technology scale-up. So you realize that when the sector was not actually involving the private sector, that's for 2016 and beyond, there were low or no production of hybrid. But when the state wanted to support that, a lot of people have actually jumped in to deliver that product. Next slide, please. So at SCIC, what is our problem? The problem that we identify is and want to solve is to be able to deliver a good technology, which is the foundation seed or early generation seed to the farmers, to the seed company, for instance, and be able to set up a system that can generate a good commercial seed also to the farmers. That is the capacity that have been lacking in the system for some time. Now that we have found a niche in that to deliver that service to, as a private sector people, to the public sector and a private commercial farmers that in this country. Next slide. So basically our mission here, as I said, is to scale up a technology, good technology for that matter, that are suitable to various agro-ecological zones that the farmers operate in. Next slide, please. So someone may ask, what is the essence of early generation? So in order for you to have a good seed, you need a foundation seed or you need a breeder seed. So I refer those technology as a bloodline, a lifeline to the every vibrancy system you want to create. You cannot have a vibrancy system without this early generation seed availability in its affordable form and good quality. Next slide. So what we have achieved now, the most important thing for me, you can see this chart, is what happened in 2021. I think it's the first of its kind in the West Africa region, where we are able to set up a smart seed business center where people can bring their seed to come and process. We had a state-of-art seed process machine. So in the 65 years of this country, no private entity was able to set up a system that we do, or we set up here. It tells you the involvement of the private sector. When the private sector has a conducive environment that make a business sense, people can actually invest. Not only the state that can do it, but the private sector can do it more efficient and more better than the state. Next slide. Good. So what is the market here? In the market where you look at the Ghana market size is about over 72 million United States dollars. Okay, that's a huge market sitting there on top. But what is tapped by the stakeholders is around $14.5 million. What we are looking at a company today is to around $1.2 million. That is from our company. Now, that's a huge market sitting there. Almost more than 50% of that market is on tap as I speak to you today. Next slide. Okay. So there are a lot of challenges in the system. You can mention a lot, but what is most important to me is the financial.
Hey, Amos, sorry to interrupt. Can you just finish up in 1 minute, please? Sorry, we're really running behind. Sorry about that.
So my point here is that there are a lot of challenges in this system, but the most important factor that is actually affecting this system is the poor financial architecture and the managerial skills of the artists. What do I mean by that? A lot of these seed companies we find in Ghana are donor-dependent seed companies. And most of the time, the people who manage this sector, they don't have the requisite knowledge to deliver the kind of business model that they want to do. So you see that a lot of donors have given out money, but the system is not improving. Of course, they have some improvement, but it's not improving as it's expected to be. Thank you.
Amos, thank you very, very much for such a fascinating insight into what the private sector is doing and how things have changed very rapidly in Ghana and the challenges that the private sector faces going forward and opportunities. Great. What an incredible market opportunity you have. So thank you for that. And as with the other speakers, you already have sort of a list of questions waiting for you in the chat. So would love it if you could take a quick look at those. And now we turn to our final speaker this afternoon, this evening, is Dr. Mark Schutt of the CGIAR and Wageningen University. Mark himself has played a leading role in elevating scaling during the One CGIAR transition, and we've asked him to tell us about the new CG innovation and scaling framework. And frankly, with more than 30 initiatives in the One CG, many of these initiatives active in the same countries and regions, how are these initiatives focusing on scaling not tripping over each other? Yeah, what are you doing in your unit to help things stay coordinated? Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, and hi everybody. Greetings from Rwanda. I'm very honored to be part of this discussion. And as Julie already said, well, maybe I should very quickly say what CGIAR is. CGIAR is a global research partnership. So our core business is doing research for development. And we are a consortium. So there's 15 organizations all contributing to CGIAR from their different expertise and perspective. And CGIAR is undergoing a major transformation as a system. And what is guiding there is our research and innovation strategy that has an objective for 2030. And the research and innovation strategy has a very strong component on innovation and scaling. And it's somehow like, you could say,
Oops, Mark, you have frozen and we can no longer hear you.
Can you hear me? I think my connection dropped very quickly.
Yes, yes. Now you're back.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So I was going to say that it's easier said than done for CGIAR to contribute to impact on the ground, because in many ways our comparative advantage is that we are a global research partnership and a global research consortium. So our comparative advantage often is that we can take technologies and other kinds of innovations from, let's say, Southeast Asia and adapt them and try to fit the realities in Africa or Latin America. So that is in many ways our comparative advantage. But I think the research and innovation strategy acknowledges that doing global research is very important, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't contribute to impact on the ground. So like in our countries, that's where the action needs to happen. And I wanted to give like 3 very concrete examples of how the One CGIAR or the CGIAR is committed to supporting national scaling. And the first one is maybe a simple one, but I think for many of us and also for our partners a very important one, and that is that in our new configuration we have a single CGIAR country convener. So irrespectively of whether you have 10 projects or 5 CGIAR centers in your country, there is one person now who is your go-to person for any kind of CGIAR business. So that CGIAR country convener knows what is going on, what kind of projects are being implemented, what kind of innovations are being developed, but also is part of, for example, these agricultural sector working groups that Eric was referring to, or the national policy dialogues that Stella was referring to. So that person is really supposed to be the glue between what CGIAR is doing on the ground and what partners are demanding from us. So this is a very concrete action that is aimed at trying to foster more coherence in innovation and scaling efforts in the different countries. I think the second concrete example is very much a product of something that I've been working on, and that is that we are trying to position ourselves better in the broader innovation and scaling ecosystem. So what do we mean with that?
Mark, you have frozen again, and we can't hear you.
Apologies, my internet is a little bit shaky.
Okay, you're back. Thank you.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that we make an important contribution, but we can't change or transform the agricultural sector on our own. And that is, of course, the same for the Ministry of Agriculture or for any kind of private sector or development organization. We need to work together. So I think it is great to see that in many of the countries where we work, there is actually these kinds of working groups that are, focusing around specific problems like climate change or specific opportunities, creating youth employment, or that have a more like sectoral focus, like for example livestock or what have you. And we are trying to work more around innovation packages, for example, where CGIAR provides access to a new technology. It can be a new seed variety, it can be something else, but where we actively work together with, let's say, the people who provide access to the market, the people who work on the finance aspect of a solution, people that are experts on creating farmer awareness, so that we much more work in partnership around specific solutions or around specific problems to make sure that we do that we tackle those in a coordinated way. What is of course very important there is that that we work in a much more demand-driven way. So of course science can supply all kinds of solutions, but there needs to be a demand for these kinds of solutions, and that requires close contact and knowledge of what farmers need, what governments need, and what the private sector needs. The last thing is specific investments in new tools, frameworks, and capacity to make scaling happen. So one of the things that I find very exciting is that for the first time in its existence, CGIAR is investing in developing a global innovation portfolio management system. Now that sounds very technical, but let me give a very concrete example. If Eric from the Ministry of Agriculture in Rwanda would call me or the Rwanda country convener and would ask, CGIAR, what do you have ready for scaling on climate change mitigation? That innovation portfolio management system can very easily
Mark, you're frozen once again. No, dear. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're back.
And provide information on what is the readiness for scaling of these innovations. So with those kinds of investment in systems, I think we will be very much better positioned to serve the national partners in actually giving them access to the innovations and giving them information about how scaling ready these innovations actually are. So apologies for breaking up a little bit, but I think let me just quickly summarize. The national country conveners, very important in somehow facilitating the interactions between the global CGIAR teams and the national partners. The ecosystem approach, where we try to work together with partners around specific innovation opportunities and challenges. And the last one is the global innovation portfolio management system that gives us much better access to information to actually bridge demand and supply with our national partners. And I'm sure Stefan will also, who will discuss some of the things that we say, will also say something about collaboration between CGIAR and GIZ Task Force on Scaling. So also a very concrete and nice example of how CGIAR and with our partners is investing in creating additional capacity to make scaling happen on the ground. Thank you so much, and apologies again for the shaky internet.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. Much appreciated. I already see some questions for you as well in the chat, and I see that Leonard and possibly could you also, Mark, put some links for folks who are wanting to know more about the CG scaling efforts and link to the research and innovation strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you. Okay, so in our last minutes, I'm happy now to turn to our panel discussant, who's Dr. Stefan Kachelreis-Mattes of GIZ. And he is going to give us his reflections on what we've heard from today. I think today's been sort of like speed dating, yeah, of a lot of different topics, really very interesting, but maybe a little difficult to draw all the threads together in a short time period. Anyway, appreciate your taking on this task, Stefan, and also if you could say a few words about what you think the role of funder organizations and technical assistance organizations such as GIZ are. What is the role in sort of helping to improve capacity, improve coordination and collaboration? So thank you very much. 10 minutes for you, please. Oops, we can't hear you.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks to the panelists also for having me here as a discussant and then trying to put a few things into perspective and putting it together, also the different perspectives. So having people from the public sector, from the private sector, and from civil society also, and from research together also is already a very good sign in terms of who should be brought to the table. It has been mentioned by Stella, I think, no, by Eric in the beginning also about sort of what are the different platforms for coordination about national dialogues and where people need to sit together also to bring the different perspectives together also from both national or regional perspective at a macro level also brought it down to meso level also. I heard a number of things about capacity building, capacity sharing also to have the necessary capacities in the private sector, in the public sector, and with at the micro level also on what impact is generated, for example, at farmers level, and the good role of what advocacy would need to play. Maybe one remark that I would give as a feedback to all my predecessors also, when we talked about scaling, maybe I haven't heard it also, but I would have loved to hear also sometimes figures also. When we talk about scale, I would have loved to hear a little bit more about the ambitions that each and everyone is setting out also from a private company, also from the business plan or from policymakers also, which are the targets that they would need and would like to achieve. The question of representation might be a topic also, because who you want to bring to the table, you mentioned it, is key, sort of to bring people to talk to each other, for example, in a joint sector review and elsewhere also, who is representing private sector, who is representing small scale farmers, who is representing also consumers, and how do you bring different ministries to the table also that may pursue very different objectives also, from health, from nutrition, from livestock, from agriculture, from climate, from environment, from water, also that I think has been one of the biggest challenges. What role somebody can play like GIZ or a donor or a funder also. Yes, we see that as a development partner, we see that national agricultural research, academia also would need to be brought to the table, international research, private sector, civil sector, public sector. We didn't hear about professional organizations today, also farmer representations, private sector associations also, to bring around the table also and what are the common objectives and goals which you would like to see at scale, considering gender, nutrition, hunger, climate, and diversity and financial issues. So as a development partner or as GIZ, we can look at it from those three perspectives, from a policy perspective and advising policymakers in everyday evidence-based policy making, therefore figures. And I think Tendai mentioned it also, you need to set baselines also, you need to set targets, you need to hold people accountable for. And of course, we can work on that meso level also, capacity building, capacity sharing, strengthening also is one of our key businesses as a technical implementation agency also. And we can look at the micro level also to generate impact. So these are a few thoughts that I would have also, but yes, please, when we talk about a community of scaling and coordination, national scaling efforts, try to be explicit on what you want to achieve together and put some figures eventually to it and bring the different people to the same table. We as GIZ or many other development partners, I hope that works also for the agricultural sector group or working group that I think Eric mentioned also, funders and development partners are ready to take eventually the role as a broker and a mediator also to bring different perspectives together. We need to bring innovations to a scale to be inclusive. Therefore, civil society is very much welcome also to play that watchdog role in it also. And we need to involve scaling partners right from the beginning, not only what do we have on offer, but also by facilitating also what are the things that you actually would need. I would like to stop here for a moment because I think there might be reactions and people should have a chance eventually to ask additional questions to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for those rich reflections on the panel. Yes, I would like to ask if any of the panelists, any of the speakers, would like to react to Stefan's comments or to any of the other presenters today. And while they're doing that, I just want to make my own comment here, which is somehow, as I think about it, I think Tendai and Eric and others who sort of make this whole issue of coordination and collaboration somehow sound, I think, easier than it is. So I think, in my work on this, I've been struck by, my gosh, this slogging, of organizing meetings and persuading people to come together and having a meaningful conversation. It is tough. And we have found it difficult, to get funding for that kind of work, right? That sort of nitty-gritty work. And I used to work at USAID, and the other issue was, in programs such as we were doing then under Feed the Future, difficult, our indicators, really, the metrics that we use for success didn't really award credit to the organization that went the extra mile to try and do that coordination or collaboration, or try to sort of reach beyond direct beneficiaries to sort of indirect, the next generation of beneficiaries that were really going to be responsible for scaling. So I wondered if any of the panelists, if Eric or Tendai or Stella or Mark would like to come back on screen and make any closing comments. We've got a lot of questions in the chat. I think not very much time to sort through them all, but let me give each of the panelists a chance to say sort of a final wrap-up word. Okay, Eric, would you like to come back on?
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Jolie. Your question is well taken. It's not easy, I do agree. But what has helped us in Rwanda, if I may dare to say that, maybe is a strong political will. Institution might have difficulty to aggregate or to bring people around, but when it comes from the top, usually we feel the pressure. So it's not only, we wouldn't say it's only the minister who puts the pressure on that. I mean, it goes really high up. I mean, the language is the same, the ministerial level. It goes up to the prime minister office, it goes to the president's office, and you feel that really strong sense of urgency to deliver and to perform. And in that sense, it has really helped the coordination system. So I would say that first is that. The second thing that helps in coordination, my understanding, is to have data. Sometimes it's really difficult to bring people around things that does not have evidence. But when there is evidence that shows the need, usually some people are really open to do the work or even to make sacrifices. The third one is, well, from the government perspective, so I'm speaking from the government side, given that there is this performance metric that is really linked to your salary, and they're the one paying you, there is that incentive to perform, because the metric is there, and there is consequences when you do not do that. So I wouldn't say that is only one thing that make the whole machine works, but it's actually multiple aspects that works to make the sector really effective. Thanks.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, Eric. Performance linked to salary, that's a very valid, a global, I think, a global metric that everybody responds to. Thank you very much. So Stella and Tendai, Stella, there's a really interesting question in the chat that I wondered if you might respond to, and that is, you mentioned a lot of interesting projects and around climate change. And someone asked, well, so how do all those get coordinated? They all sound great. How do they get coordinated? And then Tendai, when you come on, could you speak to this issue of how you talk about accountability and how important the role of CSANET is, sort of to holding the government and other stakeholders feet to the fire? Are they doing what they committed to? But how easy is it for you to get data on the budget or on performance? How easy is it for you from CSANET? So Stella, over to you, and then to Tendai, please.
Thank you, Julie, for that good question, and thank you, Stefan, for your very good comments. Let me just comment a bit about what Stefan has said before I answer the question. Regarding having figures, I agree with you. I think we should work with figures and try to have a baseline and then work to see where you'll go from the baseline. And I think most of these projects have that. They have a baseline. And as I said earlier, we are guided by this document, this ministry document called the Agricultural Sector Transformation and Growth Strategy, where we have figures. For example, that strategy is targeting reaching about 3.3 million smallholder households so that they can increase their productivity and increase their incomes. So when we look at the document, it has figures and it tells us where we are coming from and where we should go after 5 or 10 years. So the figures are there, and we are striving to use our M&E system so that we can try to see whether we are reaching there or not. And commenting on what Julie has talked about coordination of these projects. A case in point is the CGIAR project, which I've been involved in at length. The coordinating system is in at the national level. As I told you, of course, the agriculture has been devolved in Kenya. So it's in such a way that we have the coordinating system at the national level, and then we have coordinating system in the counties, such that the work that is being done what is being planned at the national level should be implemented in the counties, and the organization in such a way that officers at the national level cannot just go and start working in the counties without passing through the coordinating unit in the counties. So it works that way in the sense that the counties are the ones implementing, and the national level is the one that keeps track using their M&D system, keeps track on whether the outputs that have been set to be achieved are being achieved. So it's a very well coordinated system in such a way that the counties now are the ones implementing, and the national level are the ones now doing mostly the M&E aspects. There's something else I wanted to mention about research and innovation, which I think I was time barred. Just as advice to other ministries that want to improve their scaling, it's very important to have a very strong research and innovation unit at the ministry level, because this is a unit that keeps tab of what technologies or what innovations are being generated in different parts of the country, what innovations are being generated in different institutions. Because without that coordinating unit, you may not know what innovations are being generated, and at the end of the day, you may end up having duplication of efforts, and or rather not knowing what has been developed. So it's important for us to have that as a very strong unit in the Ministry of Agriculture. So I think I'll leave it there, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful to understand the role of the counties. And so now, Tendai, if you could respond on your ability to Stefan's comments, and also how easy it is or difficult for you and CSANET to get access to budget and performance that will help you in your role of accountability.
Okay, thank you very much. So you'll find that some of the budget documents are made accessible to the public, especially if you go on the Malawi government website under the budgets themselves. So some of them are accessible. Then sometimes it's also about relationships with the different ministries. I think now what CISANET has done is we have really tried to show that our interest is not ours alone, but it's also a national agenda. And you'll find that, for instance, when the livestock sector policy was being developed, this started with a livestock sector review, and CISANET was actually invited during those review processes. So they actually shared to us what they were getting on there as a budget in the livestock sector. So you'll find that when they understand that, no, this is not against the government or anything like that, but we are there to actually push the national agenda. Even the ministry itself sometimes is open to share documents for our review that we also need to. And again, I think we all subscribe to access to information. This is information that should be made available to us. And with that knowledge, it's often easy to engage governments and have access to some of these documents. I wanted to also speak to, I think there was a question which was posed on how easy coordination is. I think one of the things that I've also found is planning. At most times, we want to engage stakeholders when it's the implementation phase. At the planning phase, people are not even aware of what's going on. And it's very important to engage people right from the planning phase or when we are collecting data. I'll speak to the UNFSSs where the Ministry of Agriculture was the one which was convening the dialogues. But when you look at it from a food systems perspective, it's supposed to be owned by all sectors, because the issues that were picked there were issues to do with energy, issues to do with transport, issues to do with a whole lot of things that not only fall under the Ministry of Agriculture's agenda. So it's now important that in synthesizing what they might call a national investment plan, there's that need also to have all these ministries sit together and plan together on what could be the best ways to solve some of the challenges that were identified. So the planning process is equally important. And when you plan, now speaking back to the budget, there are indicators that are now put into place. And those indicators also now define how much money should be set for a specific thing. Because if you're now only putting the indicators under Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Transport will say, you never told us that there was no network in this particular area. So you have to ensure that whatever has been identified in your planning process translates into indicators throughout all the ministries so that they know that they have a mandate to also deliver on specific things that fit into the food systems. So that's what I also wanted to say, that when you now have indicators in the, because we've got what are called project-based budgets, which now define a budget per each sector. And those now have to have those specific indicators. And then if those indicators are there, money can be budgeted for it. And personnel can actually be held accountable to deliver on those indicators. So that's another component that I also wanted to include. Thank you.
Thank you, Tendai. Well said and very clear. Really appreciate it. Okay, Amos, and then Mark. Closing comments. Amos, I heard Stefan's question about targets for the private sector and also the role of private sector seed, like trade organizations. And I think I neglected to mention in my introduction of you that you've been very, very active in the National Seed Organization of Ghana. So maybe you could say a couple of words about that, and then Mark, we'll hand it over to you for anything else you would like to say before closing. And thanks to everybody. I'm holding us over a few more minutes because the discussion is so very good. So Amos. Amos, are you with us? Maybe start with Mark then. Mark should.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. I don't think I have a lot to contribute, but I do agree with what's being said in the chat, that having one common results framework, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, is very, very important as a starting point for collaboration. Usually, there's a lot of different interests and needs in any sector. Some companies want this, the government want that,
the development organization wants such and so. And for us to bridge these needs and interests, it is very important that we have like a clear dot on the horizon, like, okay, but can we all agree that this is the framework that we would like to contribute to as a starting point for negotiation, for collaboration and coordination. So I think that if we can have that as our dot on the horizon and try to work backwards from there, like Stefan is also proposing, I think that is a great starting point for better collaboration between research, development, private sector, government at the national level. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have lost Amos. You know, when we speak with private sector companies, they always say time is money. So he's no doubt on the phone talking with the client or answering a question. So I think we need to close at this point, but I have learned so much today, and I want to thank all the presenters for such really, really interesting presentations, very thoughtful. And you can see, I think all the questions, all the good comments in the chat really indicate to me this is an area that the working group needs to spend much more time on. So really appreciate the effort. Thank you. We look forward to seeing many of you at a future session. And thank you again. And I hope everybody has a good day or good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks, everyone.